welcome back to Spooky Happy Hour. I'm your host, Bree, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Frankie Adao and Anthony M., two paranormal investigators changing the way we think of and interact with spirit. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Absolutely.
I was saying good morning.
So you both have really unique approaches to the paranormal and the equipment that we use to investigate. Frankie, you're a spirit therapist and you use those skills to connect with the other side. And Anthony, you use your background in law enforcement and your skills to, build tech and streamline some procedures for investigations. So those are really cool, two distinctly different things that I'm sure work well together. And I'm very excited to get into both of those. But first, tell me a little bit about how you both met and how you got here.
All right. I guess I'll start this one. So a few years back, I was at a public investigation over at White Hill Mansion in South Jersey, and it was actually it was like Halloween weekend, and I was all excited because I had just put together an SLS camera, so I was all excited to see imaginary stick figures on my screen and everything. And it had been a while since I'd done any sort of paranormal investigations or anything like that, so I was really excited for it. And it was a cool experience. Fun things happened, and it was getting towards the end of the night, and I'm in the main staging area, I guess, talking to some people. And one of the hosts comes up to me and he goes, "Is that thing on? Is that working?" I'm like, "Well, it's not on right now. It works. I can turn it on real quick." And he's like, "Okay, great. I'm going to need you to bring this into this next room over here. There's someone having some trouble, and I was wondering if you could put the camera on him." I'm like, "Sure, no problem." So I get into this room, and it's actually like the foyer to the mansion. So imagine if you come through a front door, and there's a small hallway and a flight of steps leading upwards. On the floor between the doorway and the stairs is a gentleman on the ground or on the floor, kind of rolling around, talking about how someone's standing on top of him.
Wow.
Yeah, it was weird. It was a little bizarre. Given my background in law enforcement, I kind of jumped to, okay, this guy might not be dealing with a paranormal situation. This might be someone craving attention. This might be someone with a mental health issue, whatever it might be. So the camera and everything is all booted up. I put the camera on him, and I don't see anything at first. I'm maybe 5 or 6 feet away from him. So what I do then is I get on the steps and I get on the first landing. I put the camera on him again, still nothing. And I go a few steps higher and I have the camera on him. And all of a sudden there's this, like, from floor to ceiling stick figure standing directly where he's saying he's standing. This guy on the floor, he's saying, "Oh, he's standing on my shoulders. He's not letting me get up." And right there, lo and behold, 2 legs over his shoulders, there's a stick figure. And the crazy thing is, no piece of equipment is foolproof, right? There's always, you have to understand that. An SLS camera, usually if it picks up objects on the wall or something like that, it might start mapping it and interpreting it as a humanoid figure. There was nothing on that wall. There were no pictures. There was no clock on the wall. There was no, as far as I can remember, there was no molding or anything. It was a blank wall, and there was this figure from floor to ceiling standing exactly where this gentleman was saying that it was.
Wow, that's amazing.
It was pretty incredible. And maybe a day or two later, someone messages me on Facebook Messenger because I had uploaded it to the private page for the investigation because I wanted the person who was on the floor to see what I got, and I wanted to make sure he was okay. I actually reached out to him. So I'm just playing around on Facebook a couple of days later, and someone messages me, and it happens to be Frankie. And Frankie, I'll let you kind of explain your process.
So I actually was at the event, and so I happened to be there, and it was at White Hill Mansion, and I'm on the second floor, and I hear commotion. Of course, inquisitive, I start coming down the stairs, and I get to like the second landing, and there's this gentleman in front of me. I hear all this commotion. There's this gentleman in front of me with this SLS camera that I've never seen live in like person, only shows and all that kind of stuff. And it was Anthony, and so I'm watching everything on the SLS screen, and was amazed. And like Anthony said, I reached out to him post the investigation. I was doing a podcast at the time, and I wanted to do an episode on, you know, the experience at a White Hill Mansion, and then remembered that, and talking to Anthony after that, because are obviously the footage, and I didn't want to just arbitrarily just take it. I'm all about making sure I get permission and stuff, using people's footage and permission and all that stuff. And it was funny because one, he was just like, yeah, you know what I mean, like absolutely. And then we started connecting the dots, and I remember Anthony and his wife was there. They were in what is called a creepy bathroom, and I was like in a room off to that, and I remember walking through and kind of like interrupting them, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, and I walked into the other room, and then I had like the worst allergy attack, and like I was like trying to like not cough because if they were doing EVPs and stuff like that, so I literally was just sitting there like dying and struggling because I didn't want to interfere with their investigation. But then, you know, Anthony, after that contact through Facebook Messenger, just kept in touch. And, you know, I was talking about like how at the time there were, you know, I'm not going to mention the name, but there were ghost hunting tour companies that were charging us exuberant amount of money to go to investigations. So, you know, me being me, I looked up some, you know, like locations, and if you book privately, and so that we can book at a fraction of the price if we get like 10 people. So I reached Anthony, I'm like, you know, like, what do you think about this? What if we just kind of like grab 10 people, you know, book investigations, and then that's kind of how the team started. And then Anthony and I just started communicating and building the team, and you know, established like not only just a partnership in paranormal research, but like a brotherhood between us. And it's been working ever since. So Anthony gave us the best tagline any paranormal team can wish for, and that is serving the living, the dead, and everyone in between since 2021. So that's kind of what we've been up to since shooting that first day, you know, in October of 2021.
Yeah, and it's grown so much, right? Like over the years, you guys both have grown individually and together. And I think that any amazing group really comes down to its foundation. And when you have trust in each other, and when somebody really gets you and understands you, you're on the same page and you're working towards a common goal, it can be this force to be reckoned with. And that's how I really experienced the both of you, you know, gaining more knowledge about your content and what you do. And me being a licensed mental health professional, 40 hours a week, you know, it's like, as soon as I saw like the, you know, that part of it, and then the investigative part of it, which really speaks to my soul as well, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you two peas in a pod. And I think it's just the coolest combination. So if we get into those individual pieces, Frankie, tell me a little bit about like how you came to be a clinical therapist, and how you use those skills in the paranormal setting, and what you've learned about spirit sense.
Sure. So previously to being in behavioral mental, I was a chef in New York City. So career shift change, really wanted to do something that I connected with. And I came from a peer support kind of role into the field, and you know, went back to school, got my finished MBA, got my master's. I worked for Rutgers University, so you know, kind of like got into the clinical stuff. So I started out with this, but for some of your viewers who may not know, I started out on a PAC team, which is intense severe behavioral mental health, specifically schizoaffective schizophrenia. So I was working with people who were hearing auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, and remember being on the job for like the first week because you have to shadow people and go to see participants, and working with people who don't know each other or not connected in any way. Hearing their stories about or experiences about speaking to people who are no longer here, getting spiritual contact through cultural understanding and beliefs, and quickly said to myself, you know, I was a lover of horror and all things and all that. So it was like the stars were aligning, and I questioned the person that I was shadowing with. And literally, I remember this conversation. I was like, but what if they really are experiencing some type of paranormal situation? And because we don't look at it as a actual science in the United States, we automatically want to slap psychosis on it. And the person kind of like gave me like a look, like, I mean, like, okay, is this what we're going to have on our tea now? But it just spurred so many questions. And that's kind of what led me into getting into paranormal research, was from a parapsychology kind of aspect on, you know, what are we really dealing with here? You know, especially in various cultures, indigenous cultures specifically, they have it's looked at as to be like a special gift. So why would we, you know, look at somebody's culture and say to them, no, that is not your belief, or that is your belief, but it is not true. So we're going to slap a medical diagnosis onto you.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of my like very great colleagues, she's you know, in her culture, and this is like an open practice, so for her, so she said, "Hey, you know, you're allowed to use this, but if she came to me as a client and said, "Okay, I want you to take an egg and put it all over your body and then break it into a bowl of water or your toilet and read it," you know, if I didn't understand that cultural reference, or if she didn't explain it to me so well and she just came and said that to me, I might have a lot of question marks. And when we don't know what we don't know, we can't use it effectively.
Right. So it then just snowballed, and I went down and continuously going down this rabbit hole of connecting the. It's almost like when people ask me in my work role, what comes first, mental health or substance use? Well, that's hard to say because one can impact the other. So I do think, you know, people who are heightened to psychosis or susceptible to psychosis, it can also open up a doorway for the paranormal. You know, it's people often then ask me, like, how can you distinguish the two? Well, we have this, and Bree, you know what this is. We have this, the handy dandy DSM-5. So then it becomes a criteria. Is this person meeting criteria for schizoaffective, schizophrenic diagnosis? It's just not diagnosis criteria for people out there that have to be met, and it could be over a certain amount of time and all this kind of stuff. You know, if the criteria is not meeting the clinical, then my perspective shifts. I'll open up more of a conversation about, is this paranormal in nature that you're experiencing? Which can, you know, be difficult because, like I said, you know, I work for a major science-based research institution that probably would not want me exploring the paranormal with actual clients on the job. So, but I take that
It's like
information.
that boundary, you know, that
Right.
line of saying, like, I can offer you so much stuff, but also how does that fit into what I'm doing? And you've kind of managed to take it to that next level now.
Right, right. Because I'm taking the information that I'm learning with the people that I do in my professional role, and then applying it to doing the work in paranormal research. But we have clients on that end, you know, private clients and locations, and so I'm able to kind of bridge the two together. And you know, I'm doing some stuff with spirit, doing trauma-based work with spirit, because I think that when we go into locations or we're investigating or doing research in the paranormal, we instantaneously want to go to like, how did you die, and how, like, what were the details? But that's trauma. The two biggest trauma events in your life are birth and death. So if you're doing a trauma-based session with somebody, there's a certain way to approach trauma-based work with somebody, and we wouldn't just ask in a trauma-based clinical setting, you know, what are all your war wounds and the horror details of everything, and then, okay, the hour is up, so now you're go out into the world.
Right.
With all that open, it's just not ethically appropriate. So why are we that with spirit? And then we wonder why spirit either don't want to communicate with us or communicate with us aggressively, and we misinterpret that as them evil or having ill will towards people. But it could be from that disconnect when we're asking them to kind of share their experiences, because, you know, tools and all that kind of stuff, these were actual people that we're trying to communicate with, you know. So if we're going to ask those trauma-based questions, we really need to understand what that's like and what that can do to spirit over time, and then what that can actually do with in actual location. So doing that kind of work, and then doing also some work with people who have actually experienced PTSD due to paranormal experiences that they may have. So I'm doing it both on the living and the not living side.
Yeah, I think that it's amazing because, like you're saying too, if you wouldn't go up to somebody in the grocery store and
Mhm.
expect them to tell you their entire life story, why are you going to spirit that are trying to do it too? Like, there needs to be some level of rapport that they can trust you, that they know that their story is in good hands and it's not somebody who wants to push a certain narrative, but it's really open to hearing them. And both of you have really taken those skills that you have in your professional life and said, how can we apply this to the spirit world? So Anthony, I'm so interested in hearing about the Meg's manual. Can you tell me, like, how you took this kind of standardized procedure from law enforcement and modified it to help grade paranormal investigations?
Sure. Yeah, you said that we applied things from our professional lives and to paranormal investigation, and that wasn't necessarily my approach. I just wanted to look at things in a way that made sense. For me, it wasn't intentionally. I wasn't intentionally being like, okay, how could I change this or how could I do that? It was more like, how can I make sense of the data in front of me once we finished up an investigation after going through all my footage and my experiences and the experiences of my teammates and everything like that. The problem, not I don't want to say the problem because that makes me sound that makes me sound like a jerk. My concern with a lot of investigation in the paranormal is there are already so many assumptions that are made. You go to a haunted location, okay, then you know what? It's got to be ghosts. You know, you're kind of already you already have a set of loaded questions and answers.
That confirmation bias.
Yeah, and it happens so unintentionally. You know, like if you go into a room and someone tells you, oh, you know, the spirit of Sam likes to hang out in this room, everyone immediately starts talking to Sam, and then they get a response, oh, it was Sam. You know, this could be anything though. You know, could it be Sam? Yeah. Could it be something that is attached to the people that are investigating? Could it be a bug flying too close to your REM pod? It could be so many different things. In the law enforcement world, if I were to make assumptions like that, I would be in a lot of trouble.
I was gonna say, you probably would be very good at your job, right? Like, you need hard evidence to say this is what's happening.
Right. And when it comes to paranormal investigation, I think I'd mentioned already, like, I'm not a big fan of the E word. I'm not a big fan of evidence. Because for me personally, I'm not saying anyone else should do it this way. In order for you to have evidence, you have to have a theory that it proves. I'd rather go out there without a theory and look at where the data points to before I form that theory. So if I'm going into a haunted location, already my theory is the place is haunted and all of my evidence points to that. I'd rather look at it as where is my data leading me to? Is the location really haunted? Does it have faulty wiring? Are there people, is whatever is in the location that we're interacting with strictly in that location, or are we bringing it in with our own intention? So I'd rather look at things with a blank slate. There was a quote, I can't remember who said it, but I think it really explains a lot of my approach, which is the moment you start believing is the moment you stopped inquiring.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is once you already have a conclusion in your head, you stop asking questions. Why do we want to stop asking questions? We're investigating. We need to keep asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my little that's my little gripe right there. But as
I think
far
that
as how
it's good to say, though, because if we don't, how are we supposed to grow? How are we supposed to
Right.
understand more? How are we supposed to challenge those assumptions? And I think that getting out of our comfort zones, which really is that our beliefs are our comfort zones. If we don't push ourselves and challenge ourselves out of them, we may not know what lies ahead for us.
Right. And listen, it's great to have beliefs. I have my beliefs. But when I'm conducting that post investigation, when I'm looking at data, I kind of have to put that aside. I got to put that bias aside and look at what I have in front of me. One of the quotes that I'd heard, like on one of my first days on the job in law enforcement, was, yesterday's witness is today's perpetrator, is tomorrow's victim. Just because you deal with that same person on a regular basis, it doesn't mean that they're that person today that they were yesterday. And same thing with dealing with these locations. It might have been active yesterday. It might not have been. You might have been dealing with Sam the Ghost 2 weeks ago at the same location. You might not be dealing with Sam the Ghost today. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like I try to, when I investigate, and I try to have my teammates do the same thing. I just try to start things off with a blank slate. Every investigation is different. Yes, we can gather that data and we can compile it and look at what we have and had in the past. But let's treat everything new. We were dealing with in our own location, the Ritz Theater. We keep going back and forth on a name that keeps coming up, and it's either Howard or Harold. And it becomes this thing now. Okay, is Howard and Harold the same thing? Or is Howard something and is Harold something else? And if we keep,
they have a relationship with each other? Like, is it something that gets mixed up a lot, or is it one or two? You never really know.
Right. So, some people say, hey, you know what? Maybe it's the same thing, but we just keep getting their name wrong. Maybe, but we don't know. Right. There's so much that we don't know. So that when it comes to using the MEGS system that I've been working on, it's about focusing on what you absolutely do know versus what assumptions you can make from things. So as an example, our data is in two separate categories. You have one category that I just list as empirical, and that would be any kind of footage, audio, photographs, something that can be reviewed and verified on repeated occasions. So like let's say I have video of a REM pod going off, I could tell you, hey, there's a REM pod going off. It's lighting up. Here's the video showing it. I'm not telling you why, because maybe I don't know why. And I don't want to assume why either, right? But there's that category, or hey, here's video of a door opening. I'm not telling you what's opening the door, but there it is. Okay. The other category is anecdotal, so that's the opposite of the empirical stuff. So that would be something that you can't verify, whether you forgot to turn on your video camera and you just have to go by someone's word, or if someone felt something, or someone heard something that wasn't captured. It was someone's personal experience. You can't verify it, but you need the trust of your fellow investigators for it to work. Mm-hmm. And I think that the anecdotal data is probably the most important, because I think that's what really drives us. Because if you have something like a K2 meter lighting up, okay, that's cool. But when you have a personal experience that kind of resonates with you more than just a piece of equipment, I think that's way more interesting than video of like a door opening or something like that.
Right. I think that so much of us want to have this visual component, because for some of us, seeing is believing. But then for another half of us, like, feeling is really believing. I remember going to the Ohio State Reformatory, and I had never been there before. Yes, I've probably watched like a million different people go there, but as I'm going there for the first time for this tour, none of that stuff was really in my head. There's so much of it. It's overwhelming. You just get there and you're like, okay, you tell me about what I want to know. And we got up to a certain floor, and I turned to the partner that I was with at the time, and I was like, okay, either I'm much more out of shape, like walking up those 4 sets of stairs than I realized. I was like, or something's really like kind of constricting my breathing. This is strange. And then 2 minutes later, when our guide ends up coming up the stairs, he's like, this is the hospital ward for tuberculosis. And I was like, okay, this is my connection. Like, that's what that really was. And that was really my belief. Do I have anything to show, like empirically, to say that? No. But it is something that I will say happened to me for forever.
Right. And I think that's important to be acknowledged. You're the greatest piece of equipment that you could use on investigation, I think, is yourself. Not an EMF meter or an SLS camera or a digital voice recorder, but your own personal experience. And just because it can't be recorded on video or audio or photograph doesn't mean that it shouldn't be acknowledged. I compare it to, again, my law enforcement field. You know what? It's great now because there are cameras everywhere, which could be likened to the empirical category that we use. But what about things like witness statements? Witness statements are still accepted in a court of law. They're still acknowledged. They're still recognized. The anecdotal stuff that we pick up on, the anecdotal data that we compile, those are essentially witness statements. And they have just as much credibility as the stuff that you can't review. I'm sorry, the stuff that you can review.
Right. Well, and when we're talking about credibility too, it's hard to ever say those anecdotal pieces, like what's credible and what's not. Like, I do subscribe to like the you are your best tool. And I think that there's, for me, in my personal opinion, there's like a little bit of a caveat there, because do you know you? Do you know how your body responds to certain things? Do you know what's triggering you? And so sometimes I have people go into a certain location and they're very clear on like, this is it. And while I don't want to discredit that and I don't want to dismiss or disregard it, there is that question mark sometimes in my mind that says, well, what is your relationship to yourself? And how might that be impacting your relationship that you're having spiritually? And there's so many things that we can do that I do think come with some type of like judgment, right? And kind of, Frankie, this is my question about that to you is like, in using the neurovisor, and to my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, it's this device that manipulates light and sound, and it stimulates some multi-sensory processes, and it expands your consciousness, like the third eye chakra, and it increases your well-being all at the same time. And something like, when I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, is there really a device out there that allows this to happen? Because like, hello, sign me the freak up. But like, in your personal experience, like, what has it been like for you to use maybe something that's more controversial? And how do you think that impacts some of the data that's gathered?
Well, My approach to everything, Bree, is so different than when I started, and Anthony could attest to this. Being new to the paranormal, I wanted to do like everything. I wanted investigator. I wanted to do research. I wanted to do parapsychological stuff. I wanted to build equipment with no experience, which Anthony is phenomenal when it comes to stuff like that. We're very fortunate where we have custom made stuff that Anthony builds for us that you can't find on the market right now. So like I wanted to do everything, but then as things kind of evolved over the last couple, I returned to just doing what I know, and that's the psychological stuff. And I wanted to bring in some different techniques that that I use in my private practice work. I do a lot of holistic stuff. I'm a sound healer, and I'm certified using a neurovisor. And the controversial thing about it is, and it's a very out there theory, but the use of psychedelia in doing this work, a lot of people would have frowned upon it, but it's been used culturally in ancient civilizations for existence. You'll see hieroglyphics of people doing what looks like to be things like ayahuasca and all that kind of stuff. So to pull away, and the reason being is that connection, that use of the pineal gland, our third eye, opening that up, has been in culture for to connect to higher level of consciousness, higher level of self, spiritual realms, forever. And I wanted to kind of work around the stigma of like plant-based medicine and things like that, and was using light and sound therapy for a while. Apps, you can get apps that you can use on your phone. I wanted to kind of like take it to the next level with my clients and get a really well put together kind of avenue for me to do that. And the neurovisor was the tool that I kind of did research on and all that kind of stuff. And there, how it works is it's using light patterns and binaural beats and sounds to open up that third eye chakra, create or increase, because our brain automatically, our pineal gland automatically generates DMT, and DMT is part of what goes into ayahuasca and a lot of different psychedelia medications. And I wanted to kind of like get around that, and the neurovisor does that. It without taking a substance or plant-based medicine, it will open up the pineal gland. It will generate or increase small amounts of serotonin, melatonin, DMT. That helps in the therapeutic work that I do. People open up and will share a little bit more in regards to trauma. DMT that we produce, that's why everybody gets like vivid dreams. That's you're experiencing psychedelia all day long, even though you don't know it. So the use of it is in the field probably going to be very controversial. I use it myself. Generally when I go into, if I can, and we'll go into a location and we'll say, hey guys, I'm just gonna dip away for like 5-10 minutes and do my neurovisor session, because I want to open up myself the most that I possibly can to spirit, to make that connection. Because now my thought process have been working with Anthony and understanding the fact that the anecdotal stuff is just as important. When I learned that from Anthony, my whole perspective of what I do change. So being able to make that connection in a location is important on that level. And I would love people to try it out. to see what, because I'm like patient one, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like other people I would like to try it with.
I'm dying to, by the way. If we ever see each other and we cross paths, you better bring that sucker because I'm dying to put that on and see what's up.
I bring it with me on every investigation. And I usually, we're lucky because we have the resolution, so we can do a lot of these experiments and research and trying different things out because we're in that constant location. So it's like a controlled, well, as much as you can control the environment, but we're not going into like a different location trying out these things. We're using the Ritz as like our home base to kind of do a lot of this stuff. So
well, it provides that baseline of data, I'm assuming, too.
Right. Yeah, we can kind of like look at the elements and we know the environment. But yeah, so
paranormal research lab.
Right, exactly. It's like our paranormal research lab. I like that.
Well, it's like you decrease all the factors that you have to take into consideration when you go to all these different places because you already kind of know what you're dealing with, at least on some type of level.
Right. And I can tell you, since I've been doing the I don't know if it's placebo or I can't tell you, right? And I probably never will be able to, but I can tell you once I started doing that kind of thing to make that deeper connection with spirit, my connection and the responses I get on an anecdotal level have increased. The experiences that I have with empirical stuff, like using technology even, has increased. And it's kind of, we need to open up our, give a better term, open up our minds a little bit more and not be so rigid and punitive in approaches. The theory is not can I curse?
Of course.
Can I curse? Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I didn't want you to get like demonetized or anything, but
I've been watching myself too.
I'll say it's usually the first 5 or 10 minutes. We get past that, and then YouTube doesn't care anymore.
Okay, good. But I'm not coming into this trying to like go into investigation tripping balls. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's that tapping into, because if anybody has ever tripped balls, you know that there's this whole spiritual deeper that happens. So if we can remove the stigma of actual taking the substance and using something like a neurovisor or using meditation or using it can do to ground and center and focus ourselves and open ourselves up more, then we're making that connection, that true connection. Which I always find, then if you can make that connection with them on that type of level, they're more trusting. They're going to interact with not only you, but technology and mediums and spirits, guides and clairvoyants and sensitives. My role in doing this type of work I am not a medium. I am not a sensitive. I actually use them for the work that I do with spirit, because I do like a version, Brie, of EMDR with spirit. And I've done it and had people, room watching it, and the responses I get are, wild. Like they're responding, timing and relevance as if I'm having a therapy session with somebody, using like therapeutic responses that I would get from a client. So, it's using those kind of like outside of the box kind of modalities that are already being used and applying it into this field. The neurovisor is a great way to do that. So if you're apprehensive of taking plant medicine or any type of psychedelia, even microdosing, I don't need to tell you, microdosing is huge in our field now. Mm-hmm. So, because we're revisiting the purpose of that, and that is opening up people's communications with themselves to talk about their experiences.
Trauma disconnects us from our bodies,
right?
And like, what else gets us out of our head then maybe some extra stimulation, right? Or some type of out of body experience to see what's really
Right.
going on in here.
Right, because the goal is to take that stored trauma, you know, and I have another very odd kind of concept that probably could be disproved a million times over, but the hokey new agey thinks that because I'm doing a version of EMDR with spirit, and they're responding, so it is bilateral stimulation. So you can take the stored trauma from the back of the brain to the frontal lobe, and we start to repress what that trauma is like. So what does the trauma look like, Bree, to you? What color do you get? What smell do you get? What shapes? What animals? And then over time, when that comes up, reprocessing it, so when it does come up, the person has a different, the response is different. The color may change over time. The animal, the shape. And so my theory is, if spirit is responding to that, there has to be some stimulation there in the consciousness, that there some brain power, right? Because it's intelligent responses. It's not residual. They're responding. So what's going on over there in consciousness? Is there some brain power? Because use neural stimulation to communicate with me. So so all that, you know, it's using some of that kind of stuff like a neurovisor. If anybody's interested, they can always, when they're with me, I carry it with me, they can try it out. The only thing is, you can't be subject to seizure disorders or anything like that, because it does use some intense strobe lighting and sound. So but next
Yeah,
time,
it's like how I
if
think
we're
of the limitations for like when somebody goes to a concert, right? Which then whenever I was
Right.
introduced to this entire concept, I'm like, is that why I feel that way after concerts? Is because I'm seeing like, you know, these different light patterns, and it does feel
Right.
therapeutic, you know? Why do people cry at music? Why are strangers hugging each other when a song comes on that, you know, bonds them together? And it's the whole experience. So it sounds like,
Right.
you know, taking everything that you can to really open up and broaden the spectrum of experiences than you can have empirically and anecdotally. So Anthony, like, you build paranormal equipment like Ghost Box and other devices, and you know, we kind of already know that you don't prefer to use the word evidence. So I'm wondering two things. One, what device are you looking to make that is different, or that kind of measures some more things that we aren't really used to? And what is your philosophy on like what makes up the energy that influences our equipment?
All right, that's a lot. I might have to refill my drink for that one.
Right?
So I mean, I I had to step away from doing some building for a bit, mainly because my work schedule got a little hectic. I'm just getting back into it now. But one of my big issues with a lot of the tech building is actually the limitations of it. And it's kind of like more recently, I've been leaning more into a lot more of the anecdotal data, just because there are certain things that I experience, that we all experience, that can't necessarily be measured. So if anything, lately, I've been looking at equipment that I could use to more or less debunk things. Not in, you know, not to be the person to rain on people's parades or anything like that. I'm not going to go around being like, oh, that's because of this or that's because of that. But just so that we can get a better idea as far as like what kind of ambient energy is happening. You know, this day and age, in this modern age where everyone's got a 5G cell phone that's spitting out various levels of EMF, even when you put it on airplane mode, can kind of tarnish a lot of the readings that you can get with equipment. So as far as that, I mean, I've played around with some more basic things. I like my vibration sensors that I build. It's a very simple thing because one of our teammates asked for one because she was always wondering about footsteps. And I don't think she's ever had it triggered yet. But a friend of mine who I did build one for, we were at Wilson Castle. And unfortunately, I wasn't in the room when this was happening, because if I did, I would have lost my mind. I would have loved this. They were playing Duck Duck Goose in this room, and she had her vibration sensor on the floor. And yeah, when no people in the room were running around, that vibration sensor was going off while they were playing Duck Duck Goose. And
I love that.
yeah, like, you know, like things like that. It's really cool to me. I like playing around with motion sensors that use they're more like microwave motion sensors as opposed to the infrared ones.
Mm-hmm.
I like those a little bit more just because there's so much infrared contamination, especially if you're walking around with the camera, an infrared camera, and you've got the IR lights spinning it out. You know, you have the spinning out the infrared radiation at your infrared motion sensor. that can be problematic. But as far as like newer things, I love building my ghost boxes. I have like a very specific way I do them. You know, they have a very specific way that they sweep, and they're kind of unique to themselves. And I'm just trying to get them a little more clear sounding. You know, so I'm always tinkering with that. Frankie's been bugging me for one for the past 4 years, so don't worry, it's coming.
I'm about to bug you for one too. So
Listen, you got spray. You gotta wait, Miss Spray.
He's like, I've been in the first and in line for a very long time, so you go to the back, sister.
The problem is I'm such a perfectionist with these things. Like a lot of the time I'll give them to people who know me really well, so that when they say, oh, it stopped working, you know, they can't be like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, it's a piece of crap. And it's like, no, I'll fix it for you. I know exactly what went wrong with it.
Yeah. I mean, what devices don't we have that we use on a daily basis that need a little pruning and sprucing up from time to time?
Right. But yeah. I think that answered the tech question. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, no, you did. I like that you're getting back into it. You're having some more time to dive into those things. And I know your perfectionistic tendencies might make it a little bit longer, but you know you're going to get a good product whenever you're ready to put that out.
Right. I mean, ultimately, a lot of the time, like, I don't think I am doing anything particularly new, but what I try to do is make sure that I build something that the user can feel connected to. I think that's huge. You know,
absolutely.
One of the first things I ever built was basically my version of a REM pod, but I built it in a, you know, before people were doing it this way, I was building them in like little music boxes. I wanted to make them look attractive, not just for the people using them, but for what we might be interacting with. You know, like if you look at some other pieces of equipment, they kind of look like this weird, bizarre thing that you don't want to touch. Or, you know,
like these antennas coming out everywhere, or like little spikes here and there.
They're intimidating looking. And let's say if you might be interacting with something from 100 years ago, they're not going to want to touch that.
Right,
but
let me get out of this room.
Right. But if you have something that looks like maybe like a small wooden jewelry box or something like that, it's like, hey, that's attractive. I want to interact with that. You know, and the same thing with like the people who use the equipment. I like that. That looks nice. That resonates with me. And I think that's a big thing.
Familiarity.
Yeah, it's the familiarity, but I also found that when people have equipment that they feel that resonates with them, they connect to it better. You know, it's a really strange thing. Like I've known people where they'll say like, oh, this thing doesn't really work that well. I don't like it. It's like, well, how often have you used it? And they're like, almost never. Well, maybe start using it more. Right. You know, get familiar with it, feel connected to it. You know, sometimes
one of those big things for me is like fusing my own energy with my stuff. You know, like when I'm doing tarot, it's like I need that energy reciprocated from my deck or like a piece of equipment. Like if you're not using it often, it might not work well with you because you haven't put that time in.
Right, and I'm sure that there's a deck that you prefer using out of all the other ones.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with equipment. You know, it's all equipment, whether it's a piece of technology, whether it's a pendulum, whether it's dowsing rods, whether it's yourself. If you're comfortable with yourself and using yourself as a piece of equipment, you know, if you're not comfortable with yourself, then you're not going to make a connection.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, I got prototype 1 of the device that Anthony was talking about. And from the minute that we put it out, I'm not even playing. We got hits on it a lot. And I think it's because Anthony's intentions that, of course, that he puts into the devices. And two, because like Anthony and you guys were saying, the familiarity. We were in, I think the first time we used Mansion, and it just fit with the aesthetic of the mansion, due to the time period to connect with, and we got like really, really great results from it. And that was aha moment for me, because I had bought all this technology that everybody uses, that and I was getting a better connection with something that somebody made custom to what we do. And basically that has been my mission for the last probably year, is just getting rid of a lot of the stuff that is mass manufactured, and getting stuff built from people like Anthony, from Lauren, from Lauren Hepkinson, Austin Maynard, things that that people have put intention and hard work into. And those are the things that usually generally work and get like spirit connection.
Yeah.
But yeah,
when you know
so
where it's sourced from, it's easier to believe in it too. It's easier to believe in the energy that
right.
you're getting and getting out there.
And I like the fact that people like Anthony and Lauren and Appy Droid, who is out there in the UK, they're building technology for us to use that generally shouldn't go off.
Mm-hmm.
And if it does go off, it's probably something there that makes a little bit more sense that you can't debunk, because there's no other rationale or reasoning or conditions that are making it go off. I think that's important. I think it's, if we're going to use outside of ourselves, which both you and Anthony have both said, that's the deepest work, that's the most important work. If we are going to use technology as an engine, we really should educate ourselves on who's building it, how it's being built, have they been tested in conditions, and that kind of helps make a deeper connection, because we can trust it now rather than just buying it. Let's use, for an example, cat balls. Cat balls, you could buy 1 million of them on the internet today, right? In context of what you're using it for, versus a custom piece of equipment, to me is you doing your work. You're investing into making that connection with spirit. And I'm fortunate that my partner, my brother in all this is phenomenal. He's very humble, so he's always going to downplay his skills, but he is phenomenal at understanding electronics, how things are built, waves, and improving connections, and understanding how we are contributing sometimes to contamination in locations. It's just important for teams that are really trying to do some quality research rather than being like paranormal enthusiasts. It's important to have somebody on your team, if you don't understand that world, have somebody that kind of does, so they can improve the quality of the work that we're doing. And Anthony, I can tell you, I try. I'm the type of person that I like to understand what people are saying and what they're doing. So I tried to build some stuff. Nothing ever worked, but I understand the process. So when Anthony now is saying to me about components and waves and things that are outside of the realm of my own understanding, I have a little bit more knowledge of what he's talking about.
And knowledge is power, right. So it's like, I know that this our episode on Spooky Happy Hour will premiere after your workshop at the Ritz Theater, but tell us a little bit about that upcoming workshop on Megs and on the spirit therapy workshop, because if anybody's interested in attending, any future ones, what can they expect? Can they expect what you've been saying of like how you can take your own personal experiences and really have that other end of the spectrum too, so you can broaden your experience when you're investigating? What's that like for you guys?
So I can speak on my end of things with the Megs aspect of the workshop. Yeah, it's with the information I put out there, I don't tell anybody that they absolutely have to use this whole system and everything. But at the very least, if I can get people thinking, if I can maybe get them to think a little bit deeper, if it changes their perspective, great. If they're all in with the system, fantastic. But it's really about being a little bit more analytical with things. So I do have like a short little lecture that I like to do. With a couple of exercises in there, showing some video, showing some photos, and, more kind of like anecdotal word problems that people can go over. But just so that people can get an understanding of how it works. And then the idea is once the night's over, if people have questions about their experiences and they want to do a little review on it, we can do a review and grade it give it the number grade as per the system and just have fun with it. And that's... Yeah, and because I know that I get analytical with things. I know that I like to be aware of what's going on and sort of throw out the word debunk. But I'm not the guy to go ahead and poo-poo in people's cornflakes or anything like that. If people are having a good time, especially at our events, I want them to have a good time, and that's their experience ultimately. I'm not gonna. I can't go ahead and discredit someone's experience in that regard.
Right. You're just giving them additional tools that if they want to know more, if they want to challenge themselves, like you're right there and stepping alongside with them to make sure that their experience in doing that too is safe and supported.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that's my end of things, Frankie.
Right. No, it's hands-on, and that's why we're doing the workshop, is because these are for most fairly new concepts, especially Megs. It's going to be innovative, groundbreaking for the paranormal field. And spirit therapy is not a concept. Therapy is a concept, but spirit therapy is relatively a new thing. I'm not relating to many therapists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, psychologists out there that are starting to do this type of work. Witnessing it so people understand what it is and what the benefit is for spirit to have that in their organization. It's these two concepts, Megs and spirit therapy, are things that you need to see in person to get the concepts and to ask questions, like Anthony said, like life questions, to see it being applied, because not only are we doing the workshop, but after we're done with the workshop, we're going to do investigating of the theater. So then people can then apply the concepts they've learned in the workshop portion and put it into play during the investigation. Ask questions on the spot with Anthony. So this is what I experienced, this is what I'm picking up, so how would I rate this using Megs? Or, I'm getting this type of response, Frankie. It sounds like spirit wants to talk about something deeper that I may be ready to address with them. Sitting with them and actually doing a session with spirit. And so they can kind of take those concepts on when they leave the theater that night. That's our goal.
It takes it out of being the benefit for you and allowing it to be the benefit for all.
Right, and benefit for spirit. And that's ultimately where we should always be doing the work, is how is this experience, this communication going to benefit? Yeah, I want the experience, but how is it going to benefit spirit?
Yeah.
And I think we lose sight of that a little bit, because
absolutely
we like to exploit, then we lose focus on doing research. Then it's tantalizing, it's titillating. We want to get that paranormal entertainment kind of experience, and we know that that's just not how the work is done. So being able to apply some concepts for teams to try and, you know, have access to me and Anthony for not just there, like we're here to answer questions or video or a Zoom or something with people, if because education is ever evolving, and I think we do that really well. Anthony and I were always kind of learning how we can continue to learn that, you know, we need to do that in this field. It's just like anything else. The minute that you say you know everything, you're an expert, it's where you stop learning. So just being an eternal student life and doing this work specifically, it's benefiting spirit, which is going to benefit us ultimately.
Absolutely. And I love that perspective of it too, because we really don't, especially with more of the entertainment style of paranormal. It's really about what are we getting about out of it and how am I going to show that to you to intrigue you to want to watch me get my stuff more. And we don't really, sometimes we do ignore the other half of it, which is even more important than what we're experiencing. They're allowing us into their energy field. We work on spirit time. And once we've given that door to walk through, maybe it's just a little window or maybe some type of thing, we really want to be conscious of how we walk into it. And it's been such an honor to pick your beautiful brains today. And for all of you listening or watching, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell to be alerted of future episodes that happen here on Thirsty Thursdays. Any of the links to find both of these wonderful gentlemen will be posted in the description. And you can find out more about the innovative impact that Frankie and Anthony are having on the paranormal community. So thank you both so much for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Cheers.
Having us.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Woo.
guys. Cheers.